I am Amy Wilson, 68 years old, a retired schoolteacher from Boston, who never imagined facing my own daughter in court. When James died, I thought the worst pain of my life was behind me. Then Eleanor sued me for my own money, claiming I was mentally unfit to manage the inheritance. She nearly convinced everyone too, until that day in court when my lawyer called the surprise witness. The look on Eleanor and her lawyer's faces when that door opened told me everything. If you have ever had family turn against you when money was involved, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments where you are watching from today. James and I built our life together brick by brick over 35 wonderful years. We met in college, married young, and worked hard for everything we had. James started his construction business with just a pickup truck in his toolbox. I taught 5th grade while raising our only child, Eleanor. By the time Eleanor was born, James had expanded his business considerably. He had good business sense and a reputation for honest work. What started as a one-man operation grew into Wilson Construction, a company that eventually employed over 50 people and specialized in commercial renovations across Massachusetts. We provided Eleanor with every opportunity: private school education from kindergarten through high school, piano lessons, horse riding summer camps in Europe, and an Ivy League college education. Despite our middle-class beginnings, we gave her an upper-class life. Perhaps that was our first mistake. Eleanor was our miracle baby. After years of trying to conceive and several heartbreaking miscarriages, she came into our world when I was 40. We doted on her perhaps too much. James especially could never say no to her. When she wanted a car at 16, he bought her a brand new BMW. When she wanted to study abroad, we covered all expenses plus generous spending money. Her graduation gift was a 3-week trip to Italy. Looking back, I see the pattern of entitlement that developed, but at the time we were just expressing our love the best way we knew how. James worked so hard, and giving Eleanor the best of everything brought him joy. 3 years ago, James complained about indigestion after dinner. 2 hours later, he collapsed in our living room. The paramedics tried everything, but he was gone. Massive heart attack, they said. At 67, my soulmate was suddenly gone and my world shattered. The weeks after the funeral passed in a blur. I barely remember the service, or the endless parade of visitors bringing casseroles and condolences. Eleanor flew in from Chicago, where she had settled after college. She was genuinely devastated. Despite her flaws, she loved her father deeply. When it came time for the reading of the will, I discovered that James had been more financially successful than even I had realized. Between his business investments, our home, and life insurance, the estate was valued at over $4 million. James left detailed instructions with his attorney about how the assets should be distributed. The bulk of the estate came to me, as we had always planned. For Eleanor, James had set up a trust fund that would provide her with quarterly payments rather than a lump sum. He had seen her spending habits and financial choices over the years and made a decision that I only later came to fully appreciate. There was also money set aside specifically for any grandchildren's education. When the attorney explained these arrangements, I watched Eleanor's face carefully. There was a flash of disappointment that she quickly masked. She hugged me afterward and said Dad always knew best. I believed her sincerity at the time. Eleanor and her husband Gregory stayed for 2 weeks after the funeral. Gregory had always struck me as charming but somehow insincere. He worked in finance but seemed to change jobs frequently. They lived well beyond their means from what I could see, with an expensive home in Chicago, luxury cars, and lavish vacations documented endlessly on social media. It was during those 2 weeks that I noticed the first concerning conversations about money. Eleanor casually mentioned their mortgage was underwater after some bad investments. Gregory spoke about a business opportunity that just needed startup capital. They asked about advancing some of the trust money for special circumstances. I deflected these requests, still deep in grief, and not ready to make financial decisions. The day before they left to return to Chicago, Eleanor approached me alone. "Mom," she said, "Dad would have wanted me to help manage the estate. You know how you get confused with big financial decisions." This took me by surprise. In 35 years of marriage, I had managed our household finances while James handled the business. I had never been confused about money in my life. It was the first red flag that something was shifting in our relationship, but I was too numb with grief to recognize the danger. After Eleanor and Gregory returned to Chicago, Our phone calls became increasingly centered around money. What started as subtle hints grew more direct with each conversation. "Mom, we found the perfect vacation home as an investment. Could you advance next year's trust distribution early? The private school we want for the kids requires a large deposit. Dad would want his grandchildren to have the best education, right? Gregory has a chance to invest in a startup that could triple our money in 6 months. We just need a loan from you until then." I began to notice a pattern. Eleanor would call Chad about the grandchildren, then inevitably steer the conversation toward some financial need. When I would hesitate or suggest more modest alternatives, her warm tone would cool noticeably. 6 months after James died, I flew to Chicago to visit Eleanor and my grandchildren, 8-year-old Sophie and 5-year-old Thomas. Their home was in an exclusive neighborhood, with manicured lawns and luxury cars in every driveway. Inside, I noticed new furniture, artwork, and electronics that hadn't been there during my last visit. "Business must be going well for Gregory," I remarked during dinner. Eleanor and Gregory exchanged glances. "We manage," Gregory said smoothly, "though everything would be easier if the trust was structured differently." That night, I overheard them arguing in their bedroom. "She has millions just sitting there," Gregory hissed, "and we are drowning in debt. She has no idea how to manage that kind of money at her age." I lay awake for hours, disturbed by what I had heard. The next morning, I made an excuse to use Eleanor's computer and, feeling slightly guilty, looked at a bank statement she had left open. Their checking account was overdrawn by thousands, with dozens of charges to high-end restaurants, designer boutiques, and resorts. When I returned home, I called James's attorney, Michael Brennan, who was also the trustee for Eleanor's fund. "I'm concerned about Eleanor's financial situation," I told him. "They seem to be spending far beyond their means." Michael sighed. James had the same concerns. That's why he structured the trust the way he did. "Eleanor and Gregory have contacted me several times requesting advances or loans against future distributions. I've declined as per the trust instructions." 3 months later, Eleanor called with news. "We are moving to Boston. Gregory got a great job offer there. We will be close to you, Mom." I was thrilled at first. Having my daughter and grandchildren nearby would help fill the emptiness in my life since James died. They found a home just 20 minutes from mine in another exclusive neighborhood with a price tag I knew they couldn't afford. After they moved, I saw firsthand how they lived. Weeknight dinners at expensive restaurants, a country club membership, designer clothes for the children, new luxury cars, private school tuition, household staff. It was obvious they were spending far beyond Gregory's salary and Eleanor's trust income. The first major confrontation came 8 months after their move. Eleanor called asking to come over to discuss something important. When she arrived, she presented me with investment paperwork. "Mom, we need $300,000. Gregory has an opportunity that cannot wait. We know you have the money just sitting in low-interest accounts." When I expressed hesitation, her demeanor changed completely. The warm daughter disappeared, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "Dad would be so disappointed in how you are handling his hard-earned money," she said. "You are being selfish and short-sighted." "Eleanor, your father structured things this way to protect all of us," I tried to explain. "Large lump sums are not what he wanted for you." "Because you convinced him I couldn't handle money," she snapped. "You always controlled him, and now you are using his death to control me." I was stunned into silence. This was a version of our family history I didn't recognize. Eleanor left that day without the money she wanted, but I could see this was just the beginning of a larger conflict. After that confrontation, Eleanor began limiting my access to the grandchildren. Sunday dinners became less frequent. Planned outings were canceled last minute. When I did see Sophie and Thomas, they seemed coached to ask why I wouldn't help their parents. "Grandma, Daddy says we might have to leave our school because you won't share," Sophie said during one visit, breaking my heart. Eleanor became strategic. She invited extended family members and old family friends to dinners, where she would make concerning comments about my behavior. "Mom got lost driving to the grocery store she has used for 30 years, she would say, with exaggerated concern. "I am really worried about her memory." Or Mom called me at 3 in the morning because she couldn't remember if she had taken her medication. "I think she is getting confused." None of these incidents had actually occurred, but Eleanor told these stories with such conviction that people began watching me with worried expressions. My sister Janet called from Florida asking if I was doing okay on my own. My brother Tom took me aside at a family gathering. Amy Eleanor is concerned about how you are handling the estate. Perhaps it would be easier to let her help you with the financial decisions. You know James would want the money to benefit your daughter and grandchildren. Tom, I am perfectly capable of managing my own affairs, I insisted. Eleanor wants access to money that James specifically put in trust for good reasons. He looked skeptical. She says you have been acting erratic, making strange purchases, and forgetting important events. That does not sound like the sister I know. It was happening before my eyes. Eleanor was systematically turning my family and friends against me, planting seeds of doubt about my mental competence. Each week, another person would call or visit with concerns about my well-being, always with helpful suggestions that invariably involved giving Eleanor more control over the money. I began to feel isolated and questioned myself. Was I being unreasonable? Would James want me to help Eleanor more directly? Was I forgetting things and not realizing it? I started keeping detailed notes of every conversation and interaction. I recorded phone calls with Eleanor after particularly troubling comments. I asked my doctor to perform cognitive tests, which showed I was perfectly sharp for my age. I knew a storm was coming, and I needed to be prepared. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning. The return address was from a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a formal notice that Eleanor had filed a petition for guardianship over me, claiming I was no longer mentally competent to manage my financial affairs. My hands shook as I read the cold legal language describing me as a person of diminished capacity requiring supervision. The court date was set for 3 months away. Eleanor was asking to be named my guardian with full control over all assets and decisions. I sat at my kitchen table for hours, the letter before me, unable to fully process what was happening. My own daughter was trying to legally take control of my life. All for money. James's money. Our money that we had worked decades to build. The initial shock gave way to a deep sense of betrayal, then determination. I would not let Eleanor take everything James and I had built under false pretenses. I might be 68, but I was far from helpless. Finding a lawyer proved challenging. The first 2 attorneys I consulted seemed skeptical of my side of the story. They asked questions about my memory and suggested that perhaps my daughter had valid concerns. I realized Eleanor's narrative about my mental state had spread further than I thought. On my 3rd attempt, I found Martha Sullivan, a no-nonsense attorney specializing in elder law. She listened to my story without the doubtful expressions I had encountered elsewhere. Unfortunately, I see this kind of case more often than you might think, Martha said after I finished explaining. Adult children using guardianship proceedings to gain control of parents' assets is more common than people realize. Martha laid out what we were facing. These cases can be challenging because they often come down to perception. Eleanor is creating a narrative that you are declining mentally. We need to definitively prove otherwise and demonstrate her true motives. We developed a comprehensive strategy. First, I underwent extensive neurological and psychological evaluations with 3 separate specialists. All confirmed what I knew. I was mentally sharp, with no signs of dementia or cognitive impairment. Martha hired a private investigator to look into Eleanor and Gregory's finances. The results were worse than I had imagined. They had over $700,000 in credit card debt spread across multiple cards. Their mortgage was underwater by $200,000. Gregory had been fired from his previous job for ethical violations, not hired away as they had claimed. There were gambling charges to casinos totaling over $100,000 in the past year alone. This gives us a clear motive, Martha said when we reviewed the findings. They are drowning financially and see your assets as the solution. We also gathered evidence of Eleanor's campaign to damage my reputation. Friends and family provided statements about things Eleanor had told them. My detailed journals documented the evolution of her behavior. Phone recordings captured her manipulation tactics. My sister Janet, initially swayed by Eleanor, changed her position after visiting me for 2 weeks and seeing no signs of the confusion Eleanor had described. She agreed to testify on my behalf. As the court date approached, Martha prepared me for what would be an emotionally grueling experience. Eleanor's lawyer will try to provoke reactions from you that make you appear confused, angry, or unstable, she warned. You must remain calm and measured, no matter what is said. We practiced potential cross-examination questions for hours. Martha was ruthless in her role-playing, asking devastating personal questions designed to upset me, teaching me to respond with calm clarity. 2 weeks before the trial, we received Eleanor's witness list. It included family friends, my own brother Tom, and 2 doctors who had never treated me, but would apparently testify about typical cognitive decline patterns in people my age. The most painful revelation came when Martha's investigator uncovered the full extent of Gregory's involvement. Bank records showed he had a severe gambling addiction that had worsened over the past 5 years. There were trips to Las Vegas, Atlantic City, and online betting sites with massive losses. Eleanor had to know about this, yet she had hidden it completely. Further investigation revealed a pattern in Gregory's history. His first wife, Natalie, had come from a wealthy family. That marriage ended in divorce shortly after Gregory had burned through significant family money. Martha managed to locate and interview Natalie, who revealed disturbing similarities to my situation. "This is potentially our ace card," Martha said. Natalie's testimony could establish a pattern of behavior that makes Eleanor and Gregory's motives crystal clear. The night before the trial, I sat alone in the home where James and I had built our life together. Photos of Eleanor throughout her childhood covered the walls, her bright smile as a toddler, her serious expression on the first day of school, her radiant face at her college graduation with James and me proudly flanking her. What had happened to that girl who had once written me Mother's Day cards, proclaiming me her best friend forever? How had money poisoned her so completely that she would try to declare her own mother incompetent? I cried myself to sleep, with these unanswerable questions swirling in my mind. The courthouse was imposing a granite and marble edifice designed to intimidate. Martha met me on the steps, projecting calm confidence that helped steady my nerves. "Remember, stay composed, no matter what," she reminded me as we walked through security. Eleanor and Gregory were already seated with their attorney when we entered the courtroom. Eleanor was dressed conservatively in a navy blue dress that made her look responsible and concerned. She avoided eye contact with me. Gregory nodded slightly, his usual charming smile nowhere to be seen. Their lawyer, Bradley Parker, had a reputation as an aggressive litigator who specialized in guardianship cases. He was expensively dressed and exuded smug confidence as he arranged documents on his table. Judge Harriet Winters entered, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, with piercing eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. After preliminary matters were addressed, Parker made his opening statement. "Your Honor, this case is about protecting a vulnerable senior citizen from financial exploitation, even if that exploitation is self-inflicted through cognitive decline. Mrs. Amy Wilson, since the death of her husband, has shown increasingly concerning behavior, forgetting appointments, making unusual purchases, becoming confused about basic financial matters." He went on to paint a picture of Eleanor as the devoted daughter desperately concerned about her mother's well-being. The petitioner has tried repeatedly to address these issues privately, but her mother's condition and stubbornness have made that impossible. We reluctantly bring this matter to court as a last resort to protect Mrs. Wilson from herself. Martha's opening statement was brief and direct. "Your Honor, this case is indeed about protection, but not of Mrs. Wilson. It's about protecting Mrs. Wilson's assets from her daughter and son-in-law, who have demonstrated a pattern of financial irresponsibility and now seek to gain control of millions through false claims about Mrs. Wilson's mental state." The parade of witnesses for Eleanor's side began. Family friends testified about concerning behaviors they had supposedly observed. Most of these turned out to be ordinary senior moments exaggerated beyond recognition or completely fabricated events. Under Martha's cross-examination, several admitted they had not personally witnessed the behaviors, but had heard about them from Eleanor. Others acknowledged they had spent very little time with me in the past year and were basing their testimony on brief interactions. My brother Tom testified that I had seemed confused and overwhelmed since James's death. Martha skillfully got him to admit that he had only seen me 3 times in the past 2 years, all at family gatherings where I was understandably emotional about facing events without my husband. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Lawrence Phillips, a geriatric psychiatrist who had never met or examined me. He spoke at length about how dementia often goes unnoticed by the affected individual, and how families are usually the first to spot concerning changes. In my professional experience, he stated, when a close family member raises concerns about cognitive decline, they are correct approximately 75% of the time. During cross-examination, Martha established that Dr. Phillips was a frequent expert witness in guardianship cases, always testifying on behalf of the petitioner. She also got him to acknowledge that proper diagnosis required actual examination of the patient, which he had never conducted with me. On the third day of trial, Eleanor took the stand. She was the perfect picture of the concerned daughter dabbing tears as she described her heartbreaking decision to seek guardianship. Mom changed after Dad died, she testified. At first, I thought it was just grief, but then I noticed troubling patterns. She would call me repeatedly, forgetting she had already called. She would make plans to visit the grandchildren, and then not show up with no memory of having made the arrangements. Her voice broke as she continued. The hardest part was realizing she was making strange financial decisions. Large cash withdrawals she couldn't explain, talking about investments that made no sense. Dad worked so hard for that money, and it killed me to see it potentially being wasted or mismanaged. Parker asked her directly, "Miss Wilson, why are you pursuing this guardianship?" Eleanor looked at the judge with tear-filled eyes. "Because I love my mother, and I am terrified that she will end up financially devastated or taken advantage of by others. I just want to protect her the way she always protected me." Martha's cross-examination was methodical and devastating. "Miss Wilson, you testify that your mother makes unexplained cash withdrawals. Do you have any bank statements showing these withdrawals?" Eleanor hesitated. "I don't have the statements with me." "That's because they don't exist," Martha stated. "We have submitted Mrs. Wilson's complete financial records, showing no unexplained withdrawals of any kind." Martha then walked Eleanor through each alleged incident of confusion or missed appointments, presenting my detailed calendar and journal entries disproving each claim. Eleanor became increasingly flustered, changing details, or claiming she must have misremembered dates. "Miss Wilson, isn't it true that you and your husband are currently over $700,000 in credit card debt?" Martha asked suddenly. "Objection relevance," Parker shouted. "Your Honor, this goes directly to motive," Martha responded calmly. "I'll allow it," Judge Winters ruled. "The witness will answer." Eleanor looked trapped. "I don't know the exact amount." "Let me refresh your memory," Martha said, presenting financial documents. $738,422 across 12 credit cards. Is that accurate? Eleanor mumbled agreement. "And isn't it true that your husband, Gregory, has lost over $300,000 gambling in the past 2 years alone?" Objection. Parker was on his feet again. "Overruled. Continue." By the end of Eleanor's testimony, her carefully constructed image had begun to crumble. She had been caught in multiple contradictions and had been unable to provide evidence for any of her claims about my mental state. When it was my turn to testify, I focused on remaining calm and articulate. Parker's cross-examination was brutal. He tried repeatedly to confuse me with rapid questions about dates, times, and financial details. When that failed, he shifted to emotional manipulation. "Mrs. Wilson, why do you think your daughter would fabricate concerns about your mental health?" I looked directly at Eleanor as I answered. "Because she wants unrestricted access to money her father deliberately placed in trust to protect her from her own financial irresponsibility." Parker showed me statements from the doctors Eleanor had enlisted. "Multiple medical professionals have concerns about your cognitive function. Are all of them lying too?" "Those doctors never examined me," I replied steadily. "My actual physicians who have submitted their reports to this court have found no cognitive impairment whatsoever." By the end of the 5th day of trial, I was emotionally exhausted. Eleanor's side had presented their entire case, and while Martha had done an excellent job undermining much of it, I wasn't sure it had been enough. The doubt they had cast felt substantial. The judge's expression remained unreadable. That evening at home, I called Martha in despair. "They are making me sound like I am completely senile." "Amy, trust me, their case is much weaker than it appears. And tomorrow we start our case with strong medical evidence. Plus, I have something they aren't expecting." I went to bed that night feeling defeated despite Martha's confidence. In my darkest hour, I wondered if fighting my own daughter was worth the emotional toll. Perhaps I should just give Eleanor what she wanted. But then I remembered James and how hard he had worked, how carefully he had planned. I couldn't betray his wishes, even if it meant opposing our daughter. Our side of the case began with testimony from my regular physicians. My internist of 15 years, my neurologist, and the geriatric specialist Martha had engaged all testified to my excellent cognitive health. They presented results from multiple assessment tools showing I was functioning at or above average for my age group. Parker tried to suggest that I had been coached to perform well on these tests, but the doctors easily refuted this by explaining that the tests were designed specifically to detect coaching or manipulation. My sister Janet testified about her recent extended visit, directly contradicting many of Eleanor's claims. Friends from my volunteer work and book club spoke about my continued sharp intellect and reliable behavior. The financial forensic expert Martha had hired presented a devastating analysis of Eleanor and Gregory's financial situation, demonstrating a clear pattern of living beyond their means and accumulating unsustainable debt. By the end of the second day of our case, I felt we had effectively countered Eleanor's claims. But as we prepared to conclude our presentation, Martha informed the judge that we had one more witness to call. "Your Honor, the defense calls Natalie Prescott," Martha announced. I heard Eleanor gasp behind me. Gregory went visibly pale. Their attorney looked confused, frantically whispering with his clients. Objection. Parker was on his feet. "This witness was not on the defense's list. This is an ambush, Your Honor." Martha remained calm. "Your Honor, Miss Prescott only agreed to testify yesterday after significant reluctance. We notified opposing counsel first thing this morning as required by the rules." Parker conferred with Eleanor and Gregory, their conversation becoming increasingly heated. "Your Honor, we maintain our objection. This witness has no relevant testimony to offer in this case." Judge Winters considered for a moment. "I'm going to allow the witness, Mr. Parker. However, I will give you wide latitude in your objections if the testimony proves irrelevant." When Natalie Prescott entered the courtroom, I understood why Eleanor and Gregory had panicked. Natalie was Gregory's ex-wife, an elegant woman in her early 40s. The resemblance to Eleanor was striking. Similar coloring, similar build, even similar taste in clothing. As Natalie was sworn in, Gregory stared at the table, refusing to look up. Eleanor glared at her with undisguised hostility. Martha established Natalie's background. She came from a wealthy Boston family. She had met Gregory 15 years ago and been married to him for 6 years before divorcing 9 years ago. "Miss Prescott, why did you divorce Gregory Wilson?" Martha asked. "Objection, relevance," Parker nearly shouted. "Your Honor, this goes directly to establishing a pattern of behavior relevant to the current case," Martha responded. Judge Winters nodded. "I'll allow it. The witness may answer." Natalie looked directly at Gregory as she responded. "I divorced him after discovering he had been systematically draining my family's money through manipulation and fraud, much of it to support his gambling addiction." The courtroom went completely silent. "Could you elaborate on how this occurred?" Martha prompted. Natalie's testimony was devastating. Gregory had married her shortly after meeting her at a charity event. Within months, he had begun suggesting investments and business opportunities requiring her family's money. When her parents expressed concern, he and Natalie had limited contact with them, with Gregory claiming they were trying to control their daughter. "He isolated me from people who questioned him," Natalie explained. "Then he began suggesting I might want to seek help for anxiety when I expressed concerns about our finances. He would hide statements, claim I had agreed to expenses I hadn't, and gaslight me when I questioned transactions." She described how Gregory had convinced her that her father was becoming mentally unfit to manage the family business. He planted that seed and nurtured it constantly, pointing out normal aging behaviors as signs of serious decline. Martha presented documents showing the financial devastation Gregory had caused to Natalie's family. Nearly $2 million lost. "Miss Prescott, have you had any contact with Gregory since your divorce?" "No, I made a clean break and moved to California to rebuild my life. I would not be here today except that your investigator showed me the parallels to Mrs. Wilson's situation, and I couldn't let another family be destroyed the way mine was." Martha then presented the most damning evidence. Natalie had kept emails and text messages from her marriage. Some were from Gregory to friends joking about his retirement plan of marrying into money. Others discuss strategies for convincing Natalie that her father was losing his mental capacity. Most shocking were emails between Gregory and Eleanor from 11 years ago when he was still married to Natalie. They had apparently met at a conference and begun an affair. The emails discussed Gregory's efforts to access Natalie's family money and Eleanor's advice on how to accomplish it. So, Gregory Wilson was pursuing your family's money while simultaneously engaged in an affair with Eleanor Wilson, who was advising him on how to access your assets, Martha clarified. Yes, Natalie confirmed. I only discovered these communications after he moved out. By then, the financial damage was done. Parker's cross-examination was desperate and ineffective. He tried to paint Natalie as a bitter ex-wife, seeking revenge, but her calm demeanor and comprehensive documentation made this angle fall flat. The most powerful moment came when Martha asked her final question. Miss Prescott, when you reviewed the petition filed by Eleanor Wilson against her mother, what was your reaction? Natalie looked at me with genuine sympathy. It was like reading my own family's story all over again. The same tactics, the same language about cognitive decline, even the same approach of turning family members against each other. It's a predatory playbook, and I recognize every page. As Natalie left the courtroom, Eleanor was openly glaring at Gregory. Their unified front had cracked completely. For the first time since the trial began, Judge Winter's expression showed clear emotion. She looked disturbed by what she had heard. Martha presented one final piece of evidence to close our case. Financial records showing that 3 days after filing the guardianship petition, Eleanor and Gregory had inquired with a real estate agent about multi-million-dollar properties in the Bahamas, a non-extradition country. Your Honor, Martha concluded the evidence clearly shows that this guardianship petition was never about protecting Amy Wilson. It was a calculated attempt to gain control of her assets by fabricating concerns about her mental capacity, a strategy Gregory Wilson has employed before. Amy Wilson is mentally sharp, financially responsible, and the victim of a cruel scheme by her daughter and son-in-law. We ask that you dismiss this petition with prejudice. After closing arguments, Judge Winters announced she would take the matter under advisement and issue her ruling in 3 days. As we left the courtroom, I caught Eleanor's eye for just a moment. Beneath her anger, I saw something else. Fear. Her carefully constructed plan was unraveling, and she knew it. The 3-day wait for the judge's decision was agonizing. I alternated between hope that justice would prevail and fear that somehow Eleanor's deception would succeed. Martha assured me that the case had gone as well as possible, but nothing was ever certain in court. I was not prepared for what happened next. The day before the judge's scheduled ruling, Martha called me, her voice tight with controlled excitement. Amy, Gregory's attorney, just contacted me. Gregory wants to speak with the judge to provide new information. What kind of information? I asked, immediately suspicious. He is offering to testify against Eleanor. He claims she was the mastermind behind the guardianship petition and that he has evidence she falsified information. My head spun. Gregory turning against Eleanor. After everything they had done together, it seemed impossible. The judge agreed to hear Gregory's new testimony in chambers, with only the attorneys present. Martha called me immediately afterward. Gregory is throwing Eleanor under the bus to save himself, she explained. He provided text messages, emails, and recorded conversations where Eleanor explicitly discussed fabricating evidence about your mental state. He claims she threatened to expose his gambling if he did not go along with the plan. Do you believe him? I asked. Martha's response was measured. I believe he is telling partial truths to minimize his own culpability, but the evidence he provided is legitimate and damning to Eleanor's case. That evening, a breaking point came in my relationship with Eleanor. She showed up at my house unannounced, clearly distraught. How could you do this to me? She demanded the moment I opened the door. You have destroyed my marriage and humiliated me in court, all over money you do not even need. I let her in, maintaining my composure with effort. Eleanor, you tried to have me declared incompetent. You lied about me to our entire family. You were willing to take away my autonomy all to get your hands on money your father specifically put in trust. Because he never trusted me. Because you convinced him I couldn't handle money. You always made me the irresponsible one in his eyes. I shook my head sadly. Your father loved you more than anything in this world. He structured his will the way he did to protect you, not control you. He saw the way Gregory influenced your spending habits. He worried about you. Gregory has turned on me, she said, breaking down. He told the judge it was all my idea. He is claiming he tried to stop me. Her composed facade crumbled completely. They are looking into charging me with perjury, Mom. I could go to jail. Part of me wanted to comfort her, this child I had raised and loved. But another part, the part that had endured months of betrayal and public humiliation, held firm. What did you expect would happen, Eleanor? You and Gregory conspired to declare me mentally incompetent. You lied under oath. You manipulated family members. What outcome were you hoping for? Eleanor's response chilled me. We just needed enough money to fix our situation. Once we paid off the debts, everything would have been fine. We would have taken good care of you. By taking away my independence, by legally stripping me of my rights, I could not keep the hurt from my voice. You do not understand the pressure we were under, the debts, the threats from creditors. Gregory's gambling was out of control. I was desperate. For the first time, I saw the full extent of Eleanor's situation. She had married a man like Gregory, enabled his worst behaviors, and now found herself facing the consequences. But instead of accepting responsibility, she had tried to solve her problems by sacrificing her own mother. Eleanor, I cannot help you with this legal situation. You created it, and now you have to face it. But when it is over, if you truly want to rebuild our relationship, that door will remain open. She left in tears, angry and frightened. That night, I learned from Martha that Eleanor had fired Parker and hired a criminal defense attorney. Gregory had moved out of their home and was cooperating fully with investigators. The next morning, Judge Winters issued her ruling without waiting for the originally scheduled date. Her opinion was scathing. The court finds that the petition for guardianship was brought in bad faith, with fabricated evidence, and with the clear intent to gain control of Mrs. Wilson's assets through fraud. Not only does the court dismiss this petition with prejudice, but it refers the matter to the district attorney's office for consideration of criminal charges against Eleanor Wilson and Gregory Wilson for perjury and attempted exploitation of an elder. Judge Winters went further, issuing a restraining order preventing Eleanor or Gregory from having any control over my finances and ordering them to pay all court costs and my attorney's fees. The victory felt hollow. I had won the case completely, but at what cost? My relationship with my daughter lay in ruins. My grandchildren were caught in the middle of a terrible situation not of their making. The family James and I had built was fractured perhaps beyond repair. In the days that followed, more revelations emerged. Gregory disappeared, presumably fleeing potential criminal charges. Financial investigators discovered he had hidden accounts in the Cayman Islands money taken from Eleanor without her knowledge. Eleanor managed to avoid criminal charges by agreeing to a settlement that included community service, financial monitoring, and mandatory counseling. She and the children moved to a small apartment after their house went into foreclosure. Other family members who had sided with Eleanor began reaching out with awkward apologies. My brother Tom called, deeply ashamed of his testimony against me. I should have known better, Amy. I am so sorry I doubted you. I accepted these apologies graciously, but found it difficult to fully trust again. Martha helped me set up legal protections to prevent any similar attempts in the future. I revised my will and established clearer guidelines for the grandchildren's education fund, placing it in a trust Eleanor could not access. Through it all, I grieved. I grieved for the daughter I thought I knew. I grieved for James, who had tried to prevent this very scenario. I grieved for my grandchildren, innocent victims of their parents' poor choices. And I grieved for myself, forced at 68 to rebuild my sense of family and security. 1 year after the court battle ended, I sat in my garden reflecting on how much had changed. The large family home where James and I had raised Eleanor now belonged to a young family with 3 children. I had downsized to a comfortable townhouse in a community for active seniors, using part of the proceeds from the house sale to establish a foundation supporting elder rights. The legal ordeal had changed me profoundly. Where once I had been trusting and perhaps naive, I was now more discerning about relationships. I had learned the hard lesson that family ties, while precious, were no guarantee of loyalty or honesty. My new home became a fresh start. I filled it with only those possessions that brought me joy or held meaningful memories. My neighbors became friends who knew nothing of the court case or family drama. We shared meals, joined book clubs, and traveled together. They were relationships based on genuine connection rather than obligation or history. I found purpose in volunteer work with an elder advocacy organization that helped seniors avoid exploitation. My experience made me an effective counselor for others facing similar situations. Each person I helped heal felt like a small victory against the betrayal I had experienced. Eleanor and I maintained a careful distance for 6 months after the trial. She was legally required to stay away from my finances, but I never enforced the personal aspects of the restraining order. I still sent birthday gifts to my grandchildren and called them weekly walking, a delicate line between maintaining those relationships and respecting Eleanor's parental authority. The first step toward reconciliation came unexpectedly. Eleanor called one evening, her voice hesitant. "Mom, Sophie has a piano recital next weekend. She really wants you to come. Would you consider it?" I attended, sitting at the back of the auditorium, my heart swelling with pride as my granddaughter played beautifully. Afterward, Eleanor approached me cautiously. "Thank you for coming. It meant everything to Sophie." "She plays wonderfully," I said. "James would have been so proud." It was a small moment but significant. Eleanor had filed for divorce from Gregory, who remained out of the country, evading legal consequences. She was working as an administrative assistant and taking accounting classes at night. The extravagant lifestyle was gone, replaced by modest living and budgeting skills she had never before needed to develop. Our relationship rebuilt slowly, encounter by encounter. I maintained firm boundaries. We did not discuss money. I did not offer financial rescue from her situation. When she completed her court-mandated counseling, she asked if we could meet regularly. "The therapist helped me understand some things about myself," she confessed during one of these meetings, "about why I felt entitled to Dad's money, about how I justified the lies about you. I know an apology cannot erase what happened, but I am truly sorry, Mom." I believed her sincerity, but knew that trust once broken so completely could only be restored through consistent actions over time. I set up a structured trust for Sophie and Thomas's education that would pay their tuition directly to schools, bypassing Eleanor entirely. It was both a gift to my grandchildren and a message to my daughter that some boundaries would remain permanent. By the following Christmas, 18 months after the trial, we had established a new kind of relationship, more honest, less idealized, with clear expectations and limits. Eleanor had found a better-paying job using her new accounting skills. She had sold most of her luxury possessions to pay down debt and moved forward with Gregory completely out of her life. "I never thanked you," I told her during a quiet moment as we watched the children open gifts. She looked surprised. "For what?" "For teaching me that I am stronger than I ever knew. I would never have chosen this path, but walking it showed me what I am capable of." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I keep trying to understand how everything went so wrong. How I became someone who could do what I did to my own mother." "Money has a way of poisoning people," I said. "It amplifies both our best and worst qualities. Your father understood that, which is why he set up the trust the way he did." "I see that now," she admitted. "At the time, all I saw was money. I thought I deserved being kept from me. Now I understand Dad was trying to protect me from myself." In the 2 years since the courtroom battle, I have built a life rich in meaning, if more modest in material terms. I travel, volunteer, and enjoy my grandchildren without the weight of family deception hanging over me. Eleanor and I maintain a relationship that is respectful, if not as close as it once was. The trust I established for my grandchildren will give them educational opportunities without creating the sense of entitlement that damaged their mother. James would be proud of how I protected what we built together. Sometimes I imagine him watching over us, sadly observing the family fractures but approving of the boundaries and healing that followed. His wisdom in structuring our estate the way he did probably saved Eleanor from even worse consequences than those she faced. The most valuable lesson I learned through this painful journey is that true wealth has little to do with money. Real wealth lies in knowing who truly loves you for yourself, not what you can provide them. It lies in having the strength to stand up for yourself when necessary, even against those you love. And it lies in finding peace and purpose regardless of life's betrayals. If you have ever experienced family betrayal over money, please know you are not alone. Share your story in the comments if you feel comfortable. Sometimes naming these painful experiences helps in healing from them. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that they too can survive family betrayal and emerge stronger. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that even in our darkest moments, we have more strength than we know.